Hello, everyone. My name is Fabrizio Sunsalmi. I'm the coordinator of the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth and the Joanna de Angelis International Study Groups. I'm honored to be your host for tonight's study. Welcome to our Spiritist Study Group, where we explore the teaching of Spiritism and delve into the first Joanna de Angelis book from the psychological series, The Currentness of Jesus. Tonight, we are honored to have with us our renowned speakers, Dr. Dan Assisi from the Spiritist Institute in the USA. Dan is an author and gives public talk on the spirituality and spiritism in the USA and internationally. Dr. Humberto Schupter is a member of the Brazilian Academy of Philosophy. Humberto is a professor, researcher, and author. Silvia Gibbons from the Chico Xavier Spiritist Society in the UK. Sylvia is a humanistic counselor, bioenergetic, psychodrama, and deep memory process therapist. To our lovely speakers, welcome to our study group. As we gather here tonight to discuss and reflect on Joanna de Angelis' teaching, I invite you to share your thoughts, insights, and questions. Our goal is to create a supportive and thought-provoking environment where we can deepen our understanding on Spiritism and its principles. Our study group is a space for reflection, discussion, and spiritual growth. In this session, we will delve into the second chapter of the book, The Currentness of Jesus, called Jesus and Reincarnation. To start our discussion, I invite Umberto to open the debate. Over to you, Umberto.
Hey, thank you, everyone. I would like to quickly return to the former chapter because Joanna de Angelis was very strategic in this first chapter by referring to challenges as the essential part of human growth. And we have to observe that it is telling that she chose not to use negative words such as problems or difficulties, but a word that is intentionally ambiguous, such as challenge, because it can be uh, daring or even harmful, but it also can be a boost to creativity and to change. So a challenge is a condition when and where our individualities, our egos are invited to move on, to overcome situations. And that's extremely important. I was also talking to a friend of me who also is a great um, scholar of Joanna de Angeli, Marlon Haekdal, and he was considering the theories of the ego as maybe misguided in the sense that some of them, the most superficial theories about the ego nowadays, they almost speak of the ego as an outside object, which is very convenient to us because we can blame our egos almost as they were an entity or something non-related to our responsibility, to our choices. Uh, when in fact, Spiritism tells us that it is our moral responsibility that is the source of everything, including what we discussed heavily on WhatsApp today, disease, illnesses, and conditions, harmful conditions of any sort. So through challenges, we see or we are faced with the fact that some things in life seem unequal or unjust. And it is great that we notice that and we want to correct injustice whenever we have the chance, but also without desperation. Some very important saints in the Middle Ages, including Saint Bernard, say that the least Christian thing to do, or the most anti-Christian thing to do, is desperation, because desperation is a testimony to the lack of hope, to the lack of courage, to the lack of faith. So believing that the supreme intelligence is just and wise and caring and loving is to believe that it is also always present and um, giving proportionate help to our problems and to our challenges. And it seems to me to be the main topic here about reincarnation. She's not talking about reincarnation in theory. She's not talking about reincarnation in any technical sense or satisfying our curiosities about possible mechanisms through which reincarnation occurs, but she's talking specifically about challenges, continuing the former chapter and emphasizing that reincarnation is also a process of growth which involves challenges that endure through many lives, many life experiences. And just to finish this very brief remarks, I would also like to emphasize a couple books by non-spiritist authors that support reincarnation. First of them, the psychiatrist Jan Stevenson did not. He is a Protestant person, and as far as I know, not very orthodox Protestant. But he first considered the idea of reincarnation, taking his patients seriously. He was a child psychiatrist, and by taking seriously the discourse of the children, he once was one of the first to imagine that maybe this supposedly delusional discourses about previous lives could convey some degree of truth. Another key author is Gibbs McGregor, also Protestant, that sustains in his book on reincarnation and Christian doctrine that reincarnation is not incompatible with even Orthodox Christian theology or Christian doctrine. Now, obviously, that's a very bold assertion, but the book is very famous and provides interesting thoughts about the history of Christianity and the first church fathers and so on. But the most important book is from the also Protestant German theologian, the Lutheran pastor and theologian from the University of Halle, Helmut Obst, whose original title was Reincarnation, Weltgeschichte, eine Idee, and it's not translated yet, unfortunately. So I invite anyone in this group to translate this book, and it would sound more or less like Reincarnation, the world history of an idea. In this massive book, uh, he conducts anthropological research around the world in many indigenous communities in Americas, South and North America, in Australia, in many African countries, in Siberia, many small communities, and also in the Middle East, in the Druze community, also in Iran, I guess. And he comes to the conclusion that there is no single community in the world where reincarnation beliefs are not present. That's not the same to say, or that's not the same as saying that everyone believes in reincarnation, but people are familiar with the concept of reincarnation in every single culture, no matter how isolated this culture is. And that's a very powerful insight on, which is also one of my theses in my work, on the naturality of disbelief. So everything that is cultural must be presented in divisions. Some people eat with forks and some people eat with chopsticks, but things that happen universally, they are not cultural, they are natural. They just happen to every human being, no matter where and in which circumstances. So reincarnation and also mediumship seem to be such ideas. And that's why it's very important to know about mediumship in China or in Gambia, and reincarnation beliefs throughout the world, because it helps us showing that there is sufficient evidence to rationally conclude that reincarnation is a human belief and not something created, conceived by a specific community. I believe Joanna de Angelis is very akin, very close to these very universal remarks on the concept of reincarnation.
Thank you, Humberto. Just before I go to Sylvia and Dan for the next comments, um, Joanna mentioned about reincarnation, and I have witnessed some debate between some of segment of Christianity that they don't seem to want to accept reincarnation, and some of the arguments that have been used to justify reincarnation was about God's justice. They explain reincarnation because how can God be justice through only one person's life? Could you elaborate a little bit more on your views on what is that meant by justice, God's justice through reincarnation? How God is being just through reincarnation, in your views? Dan or Silvia or Umberto?
That is such an incredible question that is so big in many different ways that it speaks to the very nature of the worth of reincarnation, right? Um, and I think that I just want to say really quickly that one of the takeaways that I find fantastic about Joanna's writing is that she's very intentional about everything she does. So chapter one, as Umberto mentioned, she introduces Jesus and challenges. And that's how she leads, right? To remind us of the underlying idea of the book that Jesus is an incredible current model for our thinking and our behavior. And I love that right afterwards, she introduces reincarnation in the context of Jesus. In fact, she starts with a very powerful sentence. It says, if Jesus wasn't a reincarnationist, his entire message would have been fragmentary or partial, right? So I think that it speaks to the role that reincarnation, at least in my perspective, and the beauty that Spiritism brings to it, for us to understand divine justice. The things that you talked about, Fabrizio, right? The idea of having just one life doesn't give us a lot of reasoning to understand divine justice, other than you just have to believe, right? That God is just. But once we start unpacking the idea, we have many lives in which we learn, and they're a continuation of each other, and there's cause and consequence in nature, then it becomes easier for us to understand the differences in the world and why people are different, have different talents, different opportunities, and diversity of all these things. And so I love that she starts with this because I think she addresses the question that you bring, and I would love to hear what Sylvia thinks about this too. That when we see reincarnation, we understand human beings as an immortal being that have a beginning but no end, and that stretches our imagination about who we are and what we're here for. So I dare say, pigging back on the first sentence that she brings, that without reincarnation, it becomes really hard to grow in the understanding of God, if that makes sense, right? And so there's many different cases. I think we could spend many hours here talking about the cases for reincarnation from justice perspective. We sometimes share the fact that if there is just a heaven and hell and life is finite, and spiritual life is finite, and you're judged based on one life, then what's the justice in perhaps you going to so-called heaven? And even if you were a great human being, but you have somebody who you love who does not go to heaven, but goes to the other place, the basement, I like to call it, right? How could you be happy in heaven knowing that somebody you love is in fact in hell? So there's a lot of contradictions philosophically and practical in that sense. But so I want to bring Sylvia in here too to see if there's something else that maybe you would like to highlight, Sylvia. It would be great to tackle that too before maybe we look back for Humberto.
So I think this is an extremely important subject, and I find interesting that Joanna brought this uh, theme of reincarnation into this book right at the beginning, and as already being explained, and then put it very clearly. And you also, reincarnation is seen as karma, as a punishment, as talking about in spiritism, we talk about justice, and but mostly when people have talk about reincarnation, they see it as a punishment rather than a justice or something. And I think it's very important, I think, in this discussion, because we are talking about Joanna de Angelis, and she sees things in a spiritist point of view. And I think one point that is very, very important to clarify from the beginning is that in Spiritism is the only acceptance, not belief, as Kardec said, is an acceptance of idea of reincarnation, not as a punishment, not something that that you have to go through because you're being bad, but as a source of readdressing the wrongs that we have made in the past. You are not punished. You yourself, most of us anyway, are the ones who define the kind of experiences that we are going to go through in the next life. We are the architects of a future. And also we don't ask if want this or that. We ask for the trials that we go through, and because we bring sometimes a lot of guilt from the past, and as we begin to evolve and become more informed, and can we see right from wrong in our next life, we want to readdress the wrongs. Maybe we want to say, for instance, one example, we had people that maybe we have harmed them. So we asked for in another life to be a member of the family of the people that we harmed before, because we wanted to make peace with them. We wanted to become friends with them again. So we ask for our experiences and the trials that we want to go through. And it's very important that this is not imposed. This is not imposed. God doesn't tell you, oh, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. No, we ourselves choose the trials that we want to, because we will want to learn the lessons that we feel we need to learn and make good what was wrong in the past. I think this is very important, because most of people who accept the idea of reincarnation see this almost as a punishment, and it's not. And this in what Spiritism differs from any other religion that accept reincarnation, or people who accept the idea of reincarnation. And I think, as it was said before, and it's important to point out again, is that reincarnation is one of the oldest beliefs. Almost every culture had this idea. And, you start from the ancient Egyptians, back to the Greeks, the Sumerians. There is always this idea of the transmigration of the soul. And we see this in the great philosophers. And there is a point here that Joanna makes, actually, when she did in the second paragraph. Not second paragraph, in that when she says the psychotherapy that he used, she says here that it was spread around the earth. He, Jesus, sent many people talking about the language of reincarnation until the moment that he himself would confirm for, as hope for the future happiness of all creatures. And it's interesting because you see, Pythagoras and Socrates and Plato, they all talked about reincarnation as part of the writings. I think it's I'm not sure, my Greek pronunciation is not that good. I don't know much Greek actually, but Phaedo, I think, in one of the Plato's writings, that he talks about the transmigration of the soul. But the interesting thing is like Pythagoras and even Socrates, although Socrates was much more, he thought that we learned while we were outside of the physical life and we came back. He was much more closer to what we accept in Spiritism, but usually they talk about psychosis, which is a bit different. And also in this, we can return as a punishment for being bad in another life as an animal. And this is another very important point, because reincarnation is a law of progress. Once you achieve the level of being a human being with free will to decide the future of your life and what you do, you cannot go back to return to be a species that doesn't have that. We will always be reincarnated as human beings. And I think this is very important point also, that in Spiritism is very well explained. And if anyone really like to read a little bit about this, how we choose our trials, if you read the Spirit's book, in questions 258 and 259, it explains this very, very clearly, how we choose our trials. And, if you want to go to that, it would be very interesting. So I think that the point of reincarnation, just to conclude, is a law of progress. We're not going to be reincarnated as a creature that is still in a lower level of evolution. It's not a punishment. It's not something that God tells you to do that, but it's our own choice of the trials that we are going to go through because we feel that we need to learn those lessons. So, thank you.
Sylvia. Before we move on to the next subject, is there anyone who wants to type in and add anything before we move to a different
Just
discussion?
one thing, may I very quickly say something? The book that Umberto was talking about of Professor Ian Stevenson is a 20 cases suggestive of reincarnation. That's the name of the book of Ian Stevenson.
Thank you, Sylvia. So, Ian Bell?
Yeah, just to try and answer your question. If you, I mean, you can be born and last one day, less than one day. You can be born into a family where your mother is a drug addict, or your father is an alcoholic, or you can be born into a perfectly stable family where you're given a very good education and a very good psychological education from your parents with a lot of support. These vast differences, of course, are not just. And any of the other Christian systems that are proposed go nowhere near to the justice that we can see Jesus talking about in the Bible. So I think that's pretty much the main thing that she speaks about in terms of the justice. Umberto was speaking about challenges. I mean, I think that if we look in history and in our present Western competitive society, without challenges, we would go nowhere. So, I mean, challenges are absolutely an integral and fundamental part of all social history. So, yes, and about the reincarnation. Quite a few of the first people, specifically Origin, actually they spoke a lot about reincarnation and believed in it. And even later on, we can see that the Cathars were persecuted until they were no longer, because one of their main beliefs was reincarnation. So yes, it's complicated.
Thank you. Any comments, Umberto and Sylvia, before we move on?
Just one thing that Ian was just saying about the Cathars, because the Cathars actually followed the gospel according to St. John, to the letter. The whole belief was poverty and following the teachings of Jesus, and they accepted the idea of reincarnation as it is there. And they were considered heretics as well, because by then Justinian had already taken the idea of reincarnation from the teachings of, from the Christian doctrine. So just that point about the Cathars. They were quite advanced people, but
Joanna, I think we're talking about Jesus, we're talking about reincarnation, and Joanna brings in the book also, I think we need to kind of bring this up as well, the law of cause and effect, that Jesus emulated moral fortitude faithful to this law. Can you guys elaborate a little bit more on here about the law of cause and effects and what was Jesus' contribution to that?
Yeah, I would like to point to this book from Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, which was published about 70 years before Kardec, 80 years before Allan Kardec. Just one example of a thinker, not exactly a philosopher or a theologian, but someone who tried to test religion through the means of rational thought. And he concluded that reincarnation, he had no spiritual experience, no contact with mediums or revelation from outside source, but only through rational investigation, he concluded that reincarnation would be the preferable answer to the problem of injustice first. And we have been dealing here only with injustice. And second, the problem of progress. And that's why there is education in the title. He says, well, people are also very distinct in capacity, in talents, in strength, in faculties. And it would be an intrinsic injustice in the system, in the universal system, if this distribution was random. So in order to explain different degrees of progress, we also have to recur to the idea of reincarnation. And again, this was not a religious man. He was not influenced by any cold, mystical, spiritual experience. He was just making the cold, logical analysis of the two problems of justice and progress. And we had many authors in the turn from 18th to 19th century that were reincarnationists. We could mention Johann Goethe, greatest German poet, Bonnet in France, and sometimes Voltaire we are suspicious that he may have advocated reincarnation, and Immanuel Kant, one of the greatest modern philosophers. But these people were also critics of religions and especially critics of the church, because they believed that rational analysis of religion would ultimately harm religious institutions.
Sylvia?
Just one point that Umberto made. I think that there is nothing to do with mediums in Spiritism either. Reincarnation was a principle that existed in very early Christianity, and as I pointed out before, it's in the Kabbalah, the most ancient texts of the Torah and everything. We have the idea of reincarnation, even in Islam, which a lot of people, of course, does not accept openly, is not anyway. But there are two of the surahs within the Quran that they talk about the transmigration of the soul. So, I mean, of course, this is buried now and it's not accepted. And Christianity, until the Council of Constantinople, and Justinian had because his wife, she was the one who imposed, and he imposed on the bishops that were there, which are actually at the time they were called popes from different places, that they should take this out, the idea of reincarnation from the Christian body of knowledge, but Saint Augustine was Saint Augustine of Hippo. He was a reincarnationist. He accepted the idea of reincarnation. I don't think this was made different within Spiritism. On the contrary, I think the thing for mediumship and reincarnation, I think one of the main point of Spiritism is that it made it clear. It made this outside of any ideas imposed, but was something that was a reality and accepted and explained in a most rational way. You don't have to believe in certain things to accept reincarnation. And actually, Dr. Decio Yandoli, in his book about reincarnation, he said, with all the studies that have been done, reincarnation is actually a biological law. So it's completely outside of any religious or beliefs. It is, like you have green eyes because this happens and that happens in your genes and everything. And reincarnation is a biological law, which is, beginning to come and be more explained. So there were many throughout history, many philosophers, many religious people who accept the idea of reincarnation. And even now, I mean, I think in India, most people in India accept the idea of reincarnation. In Sri Lanka and Buddhists, reincarnation is a law for them. But this is, it's one of the things that Spiritism sort of clarify a lot of things. But I think if I may I make a point here, because I thought, one of the things that I love most about Joanna is that she tells you everything that's not so good, and she always gives you a solution, and she's always positive, and she always gives you a way out. How can you do to make it better? And I think, towards the end of the chapter there, she says, do not crucify your conscience in your conscience of crucify yourself with your guilt conscience after you recognize that you made a mistake. Do not imprison yourself in shadows after you identified what wrong you've done. And she goes on and on, she tells a lot of things like that. And she says, just once just change it, make it better, make it right. And so I think this is really, she says, she uses this, she's wonderful. She has made incredible imagery. I said, just be reborn from the scrums and begin again immediately, to try to avoid having terrible things in the future, painful situations and things like that. And I think this is so wonderful Just as, ask forgiveness if you felt that you hurt someone, and if someone hurt you, forgive that person and move away from them, so we try to live a happy life. And she says reincarnation, it's a superior concession that you must not waste. And I think, once we recognize the wrongs we've done, we can make it better. And she gives us this solution. And she says each moment is valuable for, for self-love and to let go of things. And I think this is very, very important. For me, this chapter here, she talks about reincarnation mostly to remind us that there is new, that we can renew ourselves. There is an opportunity to readdress wrong, that we don't need to be, dying, she uses this word, crucifying yourself with your conscience of, your guilty conscience. You understand that you made wrong. Go and do better. Try to forgive others. If they accept, fine. If they don't, let them go, and that's it. Go on with your life, because this will shorten the number of reincarnations you have on earth, and also you become a happier person. And that's what I love about what she in this chapter here is the solution that she gives to all the unhappiness that sometimes we bring to ourselves, So
Thank you, Sarah. I'm intrigued, and I want to hear group contribution, because why Joanna is talking about Jesus and reincarnation, and why she's choosing that two very relevant topics at the very, very beginning of the book. And the book, remember, is currently of Jesus. So why is it important that Joanna is talking about the currentness of Jesus and talking about himself and reincarnation? Anyone could contribute with that? How is important for us to understand reincarnation and apply that? Because John is very much about us promoting our moral renovation, our inner transformation. So why is it that she's talking about reincarnation here? What is that? What link can we make with our betterment? Because we know it's not just about, yes, I believe in reincarnation, I believe in incarnation, prove it, not prove it. But what about us? When it comes to us in our daily life, how can I actually apply this teaching that John is bringing on the chapter 2 that will make me a better person? What is the trigger that she's probably trying to provoke on us to reflect and do a self-analysis? I'll give an example. For instance, um, if I have a situation and it's a very hard situation, I'm going through hardship, and do I still think somehow it is still in my mindset that God has got to take that away from me? God has got to do something to release that thing from me. Do we still have that sometimes now and again? Or do we actually look at it and say, okay, rather than me question it, maybe I could say, well, okay, it is hard, it's difficult, but what is it that I can learn from this? Rather than going to God and say, please take this away from me. Because I think we need to analyze and do a self-analysis about ourselves. We have been thinking perhaps in many centuries like this on the gods that we bargain with them. We ask God to take the hardship away, to change our circumstance. But I think Joanna is now coming about to say to us, okay, we need to promote that change in ourselves and look those in this reincarnation, because it's giving to us as an opportunity to better ourselves and apply it. But in our daily lives, when you go through hardship, do you actually have that mindset? Or do we sometimes switch back to how we were for many centuries that we kind of put that back on God or blame God or ask God to do it, the doing that we need to do ourselves. What's your views on it? Anyone?
I think this it's a very interesting point, because even though, sometimes we think we know quite a lot or we've learned something, um, when we are going through problems, sometimes we're like, why me? Why am I suffering? That thing you said, oh, what can I do from the situation? Can I learn from the situation? You already have learned quite a lot to be there. But I think, it's in our psyche to put a responsibility to other people. And I think there was in the discussion today when people were writing some things, they were talking about, that Jesus came to take the sins of the world. And this is from the book of Isaiah, actually, that, Isaiah said he would come, and people just interpreted this, of course, because, oh, yes, so he takes the sin, we have no responsibility. And I think that that's one of the points that Joanna says, in the point I was making before. It means that you take responsibility for the wrongs you've done. You take responsibility because we learn, when our life is happy, everything is going well, we don't even think about God, but when a situation, then we pray and pray and pray, and we tend to we have, maybe you go to a friend and tell us a problem, we want them to solve it for us. We go to therapist. I mean, I've seen more than one case in which a person said, yes, but you're the therapist. You have to tell me what to do because you have to solve my problem. That's why I came here. And, I said, I'm sorry, but I cannot. I'm here to listen to you, to help you, to find your own, so you can find your own solution. And she stood up and laughed and said I was a very bad therapist because she was there for me to tell her what to do. So, it's we sometimes, I don't know if maybe we feel weak or if we don't want to do things ourselves. We tend to give problems to other people to solve, and then we think that God punishes us, and this, and I always remember that phrase from the book Nosso Lar, with André Luiz says, once we leave our physical body and we return to the spiritual world, we face the mirror of our conscience. And there, and I remember that he said sometimes it would be better that God would punish you so you could blame somebody else. He makes this point in the book. Because you have to face your own conscience because of all the things that you've done wrong. Is much harder, and that's why there is no punishment, but we punish ourselves in a way. Is our own guilt feeling that does uh, makes us feel bad. And I think eventually we will learn to take responsibility, and each person who does that is already moving forward. And I think the times now that we are living, at the end of times, I think we are already trying to do that, to take responsibility for ourselves. So
Sunshine?
Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I think at our level of evolution, we learn best through pain. I think pain is inevitable, suffering is a choice. If we don't have any pain or hardship or struggle in our lives, I think we're just going to party because we haven't really quite gotten yet to do our work, even if life seems to be a party. So I think later on in our evolution, we won't need that anymore. But yes, absolutely, we need to do our share to change. However, I also think it's important to ask God, Jesus, our guides, mentors for help. But that does not take us off the hook to do the work. I think it's a sacred collaboration that is given to us. That's an opportunity for us to reach out to. And ultimately, it is our responsibility to align our will with God's will, which will help us through those tight spots. Just to say a few words. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sunshine. Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very difficult in this world for us to suddenly just take on that new kind of mindset. We have a lot of things going on every day, a lot of these challenges which make us do sometimes the wrong thing. So that is certainly very difficult. But about what Sylvia was saying, and the idea that Jesus was taking the sins from the world. In my humble opinion, I believe that in this way, Jesus is a model. He is not doing something for you. He is showing you what to do. So in that context, if you follow him, he being the way, then you will learn how to not get rid of your own sins, but how to do things that will help against the things that you have done in the past, so that that way he is showing you and he is taking your sins for you.
Just to briefly react to these two comments from Jan and Sunshine, I think it is very interesting and telling that the book is a book about psychology, not primarily a religious book or a philosophical book, but it is a book about psychology. And at the same time, it's a book about Jesus. And that's very interesting because in the entire approach of Joanna de Angelis, some core concepts involved. They review this rational perspective about therapy. We have as Jan just said, the aspect of Jesus the healer, and a spiritual master that does something to us, but also the aspect of an accomplished and perfect human being that is also telling us about how we should be and how we should act ourselves outside, how we should teach ourselves to overcome challenges and difficulties of the lower sort.
Sunshine?
Thank you. Yeah, Umberto, to add to you what you just said, if we look at the story of Jesus and the stoning of the woman, we see a master psychologist at work, how in the end he turned it all around and held up the mirror, right? I mean, if we go step by step through that process alone, we really see a master at work. So yes, Jesus is a master healer. He's a master psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever you want to label him. And he's a master teacher, and the list goes on. So it's really beautiful and rich. Thank you.
Yes, I think that it's it's interesting that this book, that's my opinion. I think basically this book is not only about psychology. Absolutely no way whatsoever, in my point of view. This book is something that you have to look into your own soul and try to find the things and the solutions for ourselves. We are the ones who have to take responsibility for ourselves, like Sunshine said, very, very brilliantly, actually, that we do ask for help. We do ask for our friends, our families, whoever, in situations that we are in problems that we feel that we're not strong enough to survive. We ask, and we ask for God's help and for Jesus' help. I think one thing that has to be understood, in my understanding, is that Joanna de Angelis, she talks about psychology because it's a way that she's helping us all to overcome our difficulties from the past. We are living the times of change. Our planet is changing to a world of regeneration, and the ones who make the grade will go forward. So she's in a way is helping us to overcome. But I think you must never ever forget that first and foremost, Joanna de Angelis was a Christian, not a Christian, she was a follower of Jesus. From the moment that she met him as Joanna de Cusa, all her lives was dedicated to his service. And I think you can't just say, oh, this is pure psychology, because it's not. The fact that she brings Jesus was because he was a doctor, he was a psychologist, he was the friend, he was the teacher, he was the master. And I think I find one of the very interesting things that even the people who disrespect him, who hated him, what he said, they would call him rabbi, because they understood he was a master. Even the Pharisees, the Sadducees called him master. And I think this is very important. I think with the fact that Joanna brings him, because it's a way, like he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And the point that he had made is very important. He's a model. And in the Spirit's book, in question 625, when Kardec asked, that is a model for humanity, the spirits answered, Jesus. That's all. He is the model for our humanity. Everything he did was a lesson. We have to learn from him. And he also said he never separated himself from us. He always said, you can do everything I do and much more. You are gods, in many passages. So he put himself in one of us, but he is a spirit of great light, of course. And he's the way, he's a model to follow. Not always easy, but we can try, and taking responsibility. And I think that's what Joanna says, take a responsibility, and make it better. Once you know that you've done wrong, do it in a better way. And that's the solution. And I find that's, for me, it's not only a psychological book, because it would be no point to do that. That is much more. It's a way to the soul. This is a clearing of a past, and I feel that we are all together in this journey somehow. All of us here united in a journey for our souls. I don't know when we were met, maybe in the spiritual world, said one day we are going to work together. This caravan is going to go, and we're going to carry a cross, and we're going to work and be one of the people who brought Jesus back to our hearts. That's how I feel. I'm sorry, I'm very emotional about these things, but I feel very much in my heart that this is a work of love.
Thank you, Sylvia. Linda, very quickly, but we need to wrap it up.
Yes, I just wanted to bring the fact that Joanna is asking us, once we identify the mistakes we have made or whatever we have, to get over it, to start again, to forgive, to serve tirelessly, so that we can change our path. And it came to my mind that as we are talking about Jesus, a Judas came to my mind, because Judas tried to escape the mistake he made by committing suicide. So I think here I see Joanna asking us, when you make mistakes, no matter how great these mistakes are, you can start again. Don't imprison yourselves. Don't cause yourselves even greater pain, because you can free yourselves from it. And that is what Jesus has. I see Jesus as coming to do that. That's why he's the way. And I think someone mentioned that that's what he did, because this is what we need to follow. And Joanna is just reminding us here of what Jesus invited us to do.
Thank you. So I'm coming to you, Silvia and Umberto, for your closing remarks before we can close the study group tonight. I'll start with you, Umberto.
So I think we should consider Joanna de Angelis as one of these models of behavior, self-realization, self-consciousness. And it is important that we have models that are closer to us in some sense. Maybe Joanna is not even that close. But when I read her, I have the feeling that if she has challenges, and she certainly has have her challenges, they must be faced very serenely. I have always this feeling that she's so secure of herself, she's so mature, and she's so wise and full of knowledge, so learned that it is hard to even conceive or imagine a challenge that would disturb her in a way. And well, maybe we don't know, but maybe she's still far from spiritual perfection, but still she is a very powerful model. And we have other models. We spoke last week about Givaldo, for example. We have many models, actually, some of them very close to us, of wise, virtuous people that can tell us a lot about how to deal with the worst situations in life. And we just insist in not learning from these people.
Thank you, Umberto. Silvia, for your closing remarks, please.
Yes, I think there's so much to learn in a such short chapter like this. You know, there are so many different things, and I hope that we'll be able to, you know, discover something and use this for our lives and to make our lives easier, to be more understanding of our own problems, and also to reach out and try to help people and be more understanding. Because I think that's the aim of Joanna. She wants us to clear a baggage, you know, when we go to the spiritual world. If we are able to learn at least a quarter of what she was trying to teach us, we will go back in a much lighter way, you know, a baggage of the wrongs and the things we feel that we haven't achieved, whatever. And she's just trying to show us the way. She's bringing us to remind us of what we have to do, and she's teaching us in a very clear, objective, rational way. And I think this is very important. So just to follow her. All about you now. It's your
Thank you.
turn.
Okay. Well, I see this chapter as an invitation from Joanna de Angelis for us to look within and look what is happening within us in our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, because some of those could even be related to previous lives. And some of those could be that we've been repeating pattern and we have not actually opened our consciousness to understand how can you do that differently. And I think John is inviting us to say, okay, look for Jesus as your guide. Look at Jesus' teachings as how he did all those challenges he did when he was there as a model and guide for you, and see reincarnation for you as an opportunity to deal with those feelings and transform those feelings. So Joanna talking about shadows, she talking about guilty, she talking about blame in this chapter. And I think it's Joanna is inviting us to look at that, not push them away or don't put them under the carpet. Look at them now. Do this inner journey in these reincarnations so that you don't repeat the same pattern again, reincarnation after reincarnation. And the way I want to close the study group is actually her sentence. She does say, do not crucify yourself in your guilty conscience after acknowledging your error. So I wonder how many of us have been doing that? in this life on things that were done wrong this time or things that were done in previous life, we are actually resonating ourselves in that guilty. So if we acknowledge that we've done something wrong, we also have been acknowledged that reincarnation is our opportunity to change that. So I think that is what Joanna is inviting us to look at today, say, look, you have been given another reincarnation. Look at them and don't repeat the patterns like we have done in previously. And then she say, do not imprison yourself in the shadows after identify your offenses. So again, she's telling us, go and look how imperfect you are, but don't get attached to them, to those feelings that comes with it. Because reincarnation is an opportunity for you to transform those feelings, for those sentiments, those thoughts, right? Not guilty, not repentment, but how can we still feel them, but transform them? And that's the invitation I think she's doing to us. And then she still says here, do not be too bitter when you discover that you are mistaken. Again, she say, look, don't be too self-critical when you look yourself in the mirror and see all those imperfections. Because God has been giving you more opportunities through reincarnation to perfect them. And I think that is how I want to close the group, because it's actually an invitation for us to look our imperfection and change the way we feel about them. And once we've done that, we actually follow exactly how Jesus did when he came and gave us an examples as a model and guide. Okay, so I would like to say thank you everyone for your participation. Thanks for all the speakers for listening in, and I see you all next month. Bye for now.